Salutations, respected viewers. I'm George from Ireland, and here I am in Battersea Park, London, hard by Old Father Thames, the river which flows through my life. So we're just south of the River Thames. This park, well, so much has happened to it over the years. It was owned by an abbey in the Middle Ages. It was a sort of private royal estate at one time, and so on. But by the early 19th century, this is just open ground. And what was really London was growing to the north of it. Here south of the river, we were in the county of Surrey, so not considered part of London. North of the River Thames was the county of Middlesex. Many boroughs, as in towns in Middlesex. London was the area around St Paul's Cathedral, but as the boroughs of Middlesex were growing together and connecting to the city of London, there was no countryside in between. Effectively, London was much bigger than the City of London. The City of London is really only a mile in all directions around St Paul's Cathedral. Finally, in 1889, they recognised reality. North of the river, they just took that out of Middlesex. Middlesex was abolished, became Greater London. Greater London took a bit of Surrey, where we are now, and then to the east was the county of Kent. Greater London took a bit of Kent, put it all together, that's all the City of London. But anyway, so in 1846 this was purchased, this bit of open ground. It was soft underfoot and boggy in places, suitable for growing various fruits and vegetables, and a lot of lavender grew here, which is why about 2 miles south of here there's Lavender Hill, and indeed there's a road called Lavender Sweep near Clapham Junction Station. We're not too far from that. And indeed, famously, the Duke of Wellington, just before he became Prime Minister, he fought a duel against the Earl of Winchelsea. They had some sort of spat about who'd insulted who. And so they came here. It was a popular place for dueling. So with swords or with pistols, in this case it was pistols, to stand back to back, and somebody would sort of adjudicate and to walk 10 paces and turn and then fire your pistol and have a second. So as if one person being killed wasn't enough, two other guys who were not involved in the dispute could step in and get killed as well. But the thing is, that's not how it was done. They weren't going to really try and kill each other. One of them deliberately fired wide, one of them fired over his head, but that was it. Honour was satisfied. And then I think it was Lord Winchelsea issued a profuse, well, not the word profuse, an abject apology to His Grace, the Duke. If he'd done it in the first instance, when they made, there wouldn't have been a duel. But that was that. Silly as it may seem, in the Western world, well into the 19th century, that was supposedly a way to settle these matters of honour. Anyway, so there you can see the Thames. So that was bought in 1846, this 200-acre space. They only started laying out as a garden in 1858, and the Duke of Devonshire's head garden had been sent to India about 20 years earlier to collect various plants and orchids. He'd passed through some Portuguese islands in the Atlantic Ocean, Madeira, purchasing some Madeira no doubt, and stayed at the Cape Colony and so forth, bringing back plants. He laid out a subtropical garden, the only one of its kind in the British Isles at the time. But where we are now, I'm about to show you, this little bit is a peace pagoda, as in a Buddhist temple, but you can't go inside. So there was a Japanese Buddhist abbot, really, who was born in 1885. And he's known as Guruji Fuji by Gandhiji, and in 1984 he had suggested building a pagoda here in London, offering it to the British people. The Greater London Council, as in that's elected to run London's affairs, they had declared 1984 the year of peace. I wonder if their minds were concentrated partly because that's the year of George Orwell's novel, is 1984. And the Greater London Council was very Labour dominated. The Labour Party was doing very badly on a national basis. Margaret Thatcher had just won a thumping victory in the 1983 election, and she was an ardent believer in the efficacy and the ethics of nuclear weapons. The Labour Party had said no, we get rid of nuclear weapons, and Ken Livingstone was the leader of the Greater London Council. He's a Labour man and a real tribune of the ultra left, the loony left, as many people saw them. So they welcomed this gift from the Japanese, but what should I call him? That Buddhist abbot Fuji, he died in January 1985 before it could be completed. It was only completed in May 1985, and then it was opened. As you see various images of Buddha, and if you go closer, you'll see writing. I think it's in Japanese. Buddha, or Gautama, I don't know how you pronounce it, was born at Lumbini in what's now Nepal. But Nepal as such didn't exist, so it's dubious whether you can actually identify him with Nepal, but travelled over much of northern India, brought up in a very sheltered lifestyle, living in opulence. But, so one time he took a trip out of the palace. It was no longer the lap of luxury. He saw things that distressed him, people who were living in poverty, someone suffering disease, a dead man, and that changed him profoundly. And then he had his enlightenment, his revelation, his teachings. It's questionable whether Buddhism is a philosophy, it's a religion at all. Perhaps it's a philosophy, believing in reincarnation, wanting to escape reincarnation, not concerning themselves with the creation of the universe and so forth, supposedly promoting peace. Now, in Japan, almost everybody's a Buddhist, particularly the Shinto type, but that doesn't mean that they were pacifists by any means, and Buddhism can be turned to warlike purposes. You know, most people in Vietnam, Laos, Cambodia, Thailand, China, Korea were Buddhists. Don't tell me these people have never fought. They're Buddhist ethnic minorities in Russia, for example. Goodness, I'm trying to remember their name of their people. The Kalmuk people who live on the northern shore of the Caspian Sea near Astrakhan. I've met a few of these people. Anyway, so this is a little bit about Battersea Park, and it's been very popular ever since. Have pleasure gardens here, fun fairs were held here, circus was set up here. In the days when that sort of thing was incredibly popular because it was before television or even radio. So but I don't think anyone would object to the London Peace Pagoda going up. Japan was a much more consequential country in the 80s than it is now. One of the biggest economies in the world. China wasn't such a global player. And remember, when I was a schoolboy, we were always hearing about Japan. And that was the land of opportunity. Got to strike deals with the Nipponese. We don't talk about them so much anymore. I know the economy stagnated terribly in the 90s. It's grown a bit, only a little bit since. There's growing population, but they're just hugely overshadowed by China, which has got more than 10 times their population. We scarcely talk about China at all when I was a schoolboy. But when this thing was built, the Second World War had ended only 40 years earlier. So many of those veterans were still alive. We're not even that old. Whereas the few of them are still alive, but they're mostly geriatrics now. So giving you an idea what Battersea Park is like, this area of London is called Battersea. So although it was sort of bought and opened by the national government, it's now owned by Wandsworth Council, because London is divided into 32 boroughs, one of which is Wandsworth, and people are elected to Wandsworth Council, which governs the affairs of this area, like parks and playgrounds and minor roads and things like that, street lighting and bin collection, libraries, whatnot. So now it's a red road, which made me think it's a royal road, but it is a royal park, that's right. So strictly speaking, we don't have a right to be here. Her Britannic Majesty is doing us a favour by letting us to come in. And over on the north bank of the Thames is an area called Chelsea, which is a very swish area. And facing onto the Peace Pagoda is the house where the Marquis of Ripon lived, who was one of the viceroys of India. Indeed, his ancestor, the Honourable Frederick Robinson, who was Earl of Ripon, had been Prime Minister just after the Napoleonic Wars, an old Harrovian. They had that title, Lord Ripon, relating to the Yorkshire town where they owned a very extensive estate. So there's a Henry Moore statue here, there's a petting zoo, there used to be a Bark in the Park sort of beauty contest for dogs, and various comedy shows have been here. There are various foodie events where Levi Roots, however you pronounce his name, he shows you how to make his special sauce. So a lot of things have gone on here. There are little cafes and restaurants, little football pitches, and in 1864 the Football Association was founded, and because there were different rules for football in different parts of England, and so because the railways started in 1825, people were able to use George Stephenson's invention to travel with his unleashed swiftness, go hundreds of miles in a day, and go to a distant county where the rules might be different. So they said, let's sort out, sit down and agree, what is the actual rule? Is the goalie allowed to use his hands or not? How many players are there? How long is a half? Are there two halves, or is there no half time, or what? And so finally they thrashed it out, and the very first exhibition football match, according to these rules, was played here at Battersea Park. And so some famous football teams used it. Now little kids football teams practice here. The only time I once met Johnny Vaughan. He's not very well known these days, but Johnny Vaughan was a famous television host in the 90s into the noughties. And I was here, and I happened to see him with his children going to the playground. We chatted to him. It's just after that show called Space Cadets was on. Hey, look at the Thames now. You can see it's quite high because it's tidal down to Teddington, which is to the west, which is about 20 miles that way as the river meanders. Okay, now I think that is that Chelsea Bridge, and the other one's Battersea Bridge. It's sort of a wedding cake one. Anyway, and then you see various barges here, some pleasure cruises, not too popular. Yeah, it's one of these houses here that the Marquis of Ripon lived in. I can't remember which one. It was under very extensive repair when I walked past it a few months ago, so I felt I couldn't film it, it'd be pointless. But it made me think, my goodness, this man was ruling the subcontinent, India in those days, including Pakistan, Bangladesh, and even Myanmar. And in a sense, he was the most powerful man in the world. Because of the sheer population of India, the greater India, was higher than that of China, and had almost absolute power, almost untrammeled power, because communications with London were not very swift. I know he was really just the Queen's understudy, but nevertheless, we're looking back to the 19th century, and this is where he ended his days, looking out onto this river, when there was that hot, distant land which he'd ruled, and here he was somewhere so different, so placid and verdant. And I know some regions of northern India can be like this, demi-paradisical. But it gave me food for thought. There was a famous dispute here way back in around about 1904, the brown dog affair. So some medical students had to perform vivisection, as in cutting up animals alive. I'm not sure what this was teaching them about anatomy or how to perform operation, surgery. I don't know if the dog was even anaesthetized, first of all, because Joseph Lister had invented anesthesiology not long before, as coincidence would have it, just across the river there. But anyway, and so people, this is a nation of dog lovers. Ireland, we got the highest rate of canine ownership on the globe, and Great Britain is not far behind. But it's not true that British people love dogs as much as their children. They love dogs more than their children, so got priorities right. You know, if a dog is far better than a child, faithful companion, dog will die for you. A dog would attack its man 10 times its size to save you. Dogs give, where cats take, you know. So that's what they talk about, you know, dog-like loyalty. Suits me. But I digress. So this was a very contentious topic. Was it right to cut these dogs up whilst alive, or was it just egregiously cruel? Was it just unnecessary sadism? Were they getting a kick out of the sheer agony they're inflicting on the poor little pooch? Where were they getting these mutts from? So some people erected a statue to the brown dog, and other medical students tore it down. And there was such a kerfuffle about it for several years in the Edwardian era. And then in more recent years, they've re-erected a statue of the brown dog. So there's an anti-vivisection league, so that's it. Anyway, so looking across to Chelsea, which I mentioned over there, obviously Chelsea, New York is named after this area. So until the early 19th century, there's largely vegetable gardens over there in Chelsea, and it was very much a Middlesex. London wasn't there, but then expanded to London, and it was tending to become a very fashionable area to live in. A lot of well-to-do artists and writers live there. Of course, an absolute fortune to live there now. There's the Royal Hospital, Chelsea, which is not actually a hospital in our understanding of it. It's like a retirement home for old soldiers, the Chelsea pensioners who potter around. If they are single, have no dependent children, then they can live there, wear the uniform and so on. Margaret Thatcher's ashes are interred there, not that she was a military person. Anyway, what else can I tell you about Battersea Park? Perhaps that's enough. So this whole area is Battersea, which is part of the borough of Wandsworth. And because Her Britannic Majesty opened this in 1858, the streets around bear the names of various royal personages. Well, there's Queen Victoria Street, there's Prince of Wales Drive, after her son, the future Edward VII, and perhaps there are others which have names that escape me. So just occasionally there'll be small musical events here. There's a bandstand and so forth. And the First World War, the Second World War, it was turned into a little garden allotments because people had to grow vegetables as much as possible. The United Kingdom used to produce only 1/3% of food when the First World War broke out, and import the rest because it's a very industrial country, and that had to suddenly change, obviously. Not so easy to purchase food abroad. The enemy wasn't going to sell it. Neutrals were more reluctant to transport it because it could be sunk. Obviously, British shipping could be sunk, and British shipping had to be conserved as much as possible to transport troops and munitions and so on. And even if foreign sailors were willing to transport foodstuffs and other items to the United Kingdom, they would be charging over the odds. It was danger money because it was a very hazardous thing to be sailing in the waters adjacent to the British Isles because of the U-boat campaign sinking even neutral merchant shipping. All right, so I think that's probably enough from Battersea Park. So well worth a visit. Coming up to another bridge here, which I think is Battersea Bridge. strangely enough, opened by a Prime Minister of Canada in 1930. I can't remember which one, whether it was Mackenzie King. So please follow me on Instagram, Twitter, on Facebook, George from Ireland. Book online lessons with me in history, politics, English as a foreign language, English literature, linguistics, religious studies, what else is there? Things of that nature, interview practice. I help people with that. All sorts of exams like, 11 plus, common entrance, scholarship exams, GCSE, A-levels, international baccalaureate, and I edit documents for people, help them with their CV and covering letter, and help them with academic projects. And what else do I do? The citizenship test, life in the UK, IELTS, help prepare people for law degrees, support them whilst they're in there. I'm a tour guide in London. I translate from French, Spanish, Italian, German, Romanian and Russian. Okay, that's enough from Battersea Park. So goodbye everyone, and keep those donations coming on PayPal and Patreon. I wouldn't be able to do this without you. Thank you so much, you armchair travellers. You've had a tour of London.